not going to do the video yet. First, I will read 3 poems. Dear lonely animal, I'm writing to you from the loneliest, most secluded island in the world. I mean, the farthest away place from anything else. There are so many fruits here growing on trees or on vines that wrap and wrap. Fruits like I've never seen except the bananas. All night the abandoned dogs howled. I wonder if one dog gives the first howl and if they take turns who's first, like carrying the flag in school. Carrying the flag way out in front and the others following along behind in 2 long lines, pairs holding hands. Also, the roosters here crow from 4 a.m. onward. They're still crowing right now, and it's almost noon here on the island. Noon stares back no matter where you are. Today, I'm going to hike to the extinct volcano and balance on the rim of the crater. Yesterday, a gust almost blew me inside. I heard that the black widows live inside the volcano, far down below in the high grasses that you can't see from the rim. Well, I was going to tell you that this morning the bells rang and I followed them, and at the source of the bells, there I found so many animals, all gathered together in a room with carved wooden statues and wooden benches and low wooden slats for kneeling. And the animals were there singing together, all their voices singing with big, strong voices rising from even the filthiest animals. I mean, I've seen animals come together and sing before, except in high, fancy vaults where bits of colored glass are pieced together into stories. Some days I want to sing with them. I wish more animals sang together all the time. But then I can't sing sometimes because I think of the news that happens when the animals stop singing. And then I think of all the medications and their side effects that are advertised between the pieces of news. And then I think of all the money the drug companies spent to videotape their photogenic, well-groomed animals, and all the money they spent to buy a primetime spot. And I think, what money buys the news, and what news creates the drugs, and what drugs control the animals. And I get so choked I can't sing anymore, lonely animal. I can't sing with the other animals because it's hard to know what an animal will do when it stops singing. It's complicated, you know, it's just complicated. I got really obsessed with repetition, so like what it produces if you take it to real extremes. So here's one result of that. It's called Must of Violence. Am I sitting too close? Too far away? This is good. Thumbs up. Must of Violence. Must a violence be administered? Must a violence be enacted upon? Must a violence be had to oneself? Must a violence be endured? Must an unanticipated violence? Must a violence beyond one's control? Must a modicum of violence? Must a dosage or capsule full of violence? Must an irregularly dispensed occasional vaccination of violence? Must a violence be inflicted upon? Must a violence first be undergone? unless a machine is built, unless a machine can anticipate, unless a machine's precision, unless the exactitude of a machine can be employed, unless the clean functionality of a machine, unless the useful reliability of a machine, unless a machine's metallic composition, unless a machine's efficiency and preoccupation, unless the spinning cogs of a well-oiled machine, unless the gears and circuitry of a handsome machine, unless a machine whose constant vibrating hum, unless a machine in synchronization, unless a threshing machine be devised, unless a winnowing machine, unless a machine is invented by inventors, unless a machine can first predict, unless a machine can graph and then extrapolate. How many hits does it take? How many hits to disassemble? How many hits to scatter the ingredients in a useful circumference? How many hits to decontextualize? How many hits to see the material on its own terms? How many hits to purify the elements? How many hits to distill the proper essence? How many hits to extract the volatile components? How many hits not to ask what your country can do for you? How many hits to scramble the wiring? How many hits to jar the assumptions just enough? How many hits to isolate the isotopes? How many hits to hammer at white heat? How many hits to break the bonds and reforge the remnant molecules? How many hits to loosen like a tooth that offers a newer tooth beneath? How many hits to solve a logic puzzle by ejection button? How many hits to tear the canvas and break the glass? How many hits to lay it all out? How many hits are just enough hits? How many hits are not one too many hits? How many hits are the perfect number of hits? How many hits are a grand slam of hits? How many hits are the exact duress of hits? How many hits to achieve a boiling point of matter? How many hits to execute with great precision? How many hits to reach a certain brink? What is the certainty of the brink? What is the indisputable, most defining characteristic of the brink? What is the unmistakable distinguishing feature of the brink? What is the je ne sais quoi of the brink? What is the elusive, unplaceable perfume worn discreetly by the brink? What is the quality of air surrounding the brink? What is the punctured skin or surface area of the brink? What is the ragged groundwork, the contour of the brink? What is the fluctuating elevation of the brink? What is the mercurial temperature by day and by night of the brink? What is the precise longitude and latitude of the brink? What are the geological constituents of the brink? What is the constitutional makeup of the brink? Is there a flag staked at the brink? Is there my country's flag staked at the brink? Is my family's crest staked at the brink? Is my clan's necessary plaid staked at the brink? Is there a base camp at the brink? Is there a campfire at the brink? Is there room for footwork at the brink? Is there a showcase at the brink? Is there a rationing of provisions at the brink? Are the comestables divided fairly at the brink? Will the pork be salted at the brink? Is the brink made of salt? Is the brink made of ice? Is the brink made of stone? Is the brink made of red clay? Is the brink made of dust? Is the brink made of petrified wood? Is the brink made of flower stems? Is the brink made of animal pelts? Is the brink made of eggshells? Is the brink made of fruit rinds? Is the brink made of rats' nests? Is the brink made of calcite? Is the brink made of teeth? Is the brink made of feathers? Is the brink made of marble? Is the brink made of straw? Is the brink made of chaff? The Worms is the next poem. The Worms. The worms were tapping on my forehead. They tapped with the blunt ends of their mouths. They were testing the sturdiness of the ground. They were testing the quality of the sediment. 2 worms crawled down my face to line the lower edges of my cheekbones. They drew a string they held between them. A 3rd worm plucked the string. They were testing the pitch and tuning of the gauntness of my face, of the tautness of my skin across its scaffolding. They were warming up the chorus and the soloists. 1 worm shimmied under the string. 1 worm hung its trousers on the string. 1 worm balanced on the string holding a parasol. 1 worm used the string to shoot an arrow up into the sky. Shoot at the sun, shoot at the sun. One worm bellowed into its megaphone. One worm belted field positions. One worm preached a sermon. One worm placed a catalog order, artisanal handiworks. One worm struck a hard rubber mallet on its metallophone. Some worms, listening to the sermon, lay writhing on their sides. Some shrieked like terrible children. Some worms, listening to the sermon, lay draped, limp over the dirt pews. A worm, listening to the metallophone, tried to wedge his way under the instrument for an intimate experience of the music. A worm in the dirt manse embroidered crosses on a worm's stole. I was lying on my back in the fluorescent nurse's room, a curtain drawn around my cot. A worm voice over the high school loudspeaker interrupted the broadcast of my favorite patriotic anthem. A crackle in its voice made me long for dry cereal with profound emptiness and irrational desire. The worm voice said, "Will Oni Buchanan please come to the main office? Oni Buchanan, come to the main office." "Go to the main office," the school nurse said to me. Okay, I'll do this movie thing. So, hang on. What did the shutter do? Is that doing the right thing? There's a password here. Incorrect password. Oh, it's not. Oh, there we go. But now I can't see it on here. So I did one more. Wait, there we go. All right, awesome. Okay, so I wrote this kinetic poem, and this is just a splash page, but I was really obsessed with the plant, the mandrake plant, and I mean I totally illegally conflated two completely different species of mandrake plant, the European mandrake and the American mandrake, and all the associations with both of them. The European mandrake is really, really like the most famous literary plant besides the rose, I guess. It's in Beckett's and Waiting for Godot when they're hanging themselves under the tree and talking about, how their semen is going to bring up the mandrake plant. It's in Shakespeare, it's in Donne, Get With Child a Mandrake Root. It's in what's that movie, Pan's Labyrinth, where there's the mandrake and he puts it under the bed. It's in Harry Potter, when they're replanting mandrakes and they have to cover their ears, which brings me to like the most essential point of this plant and why I picked it, is that it has a rhizomatous root system, so all the plants are connected underground. So you see these individual plants, these huge fields of plants, but there's like a network underground that connects all of them. So that supposedly, and this is the Harry Potter thing, is supposedly if you pull up one plant, you're ruining the entire raft of mandrakes or whatever it is. It's a raft of ducks, but I'm kind of just applying it to this plant, fine. You are ruining this whole network of plants, and so supposedly if you pull up one plant, it emits a mortal shriek, and if you overhear it, then you die. It's not funny, Michael. It's not funny. So, but it's a very valuable plant because it has many, many uses. In Pan's Labyrinth, she's using it for an easy birth, for her mother. It's used for fertility. It's used for, doctors use it for, it's one of the earliest anesthetics. And that comes in layers of use. So if you use a little bit of it, not enough to anesthetize yourself, then you can hallucinate If you use enough to anesthetize yourself, then you don't feel pain, and then you can just keep taking it, and to commit suicide, you'll end up killing yourself. It can be also used as an aphrodisiac. You can get rid of genital warts. It can bring you money. If you wrap its root in a certain silk cloth and put it in a basket overnight, there's just all these things, and so there's so many reasons to harvest it, but then there's the mortal shriek problem, and so you have to try to solve it. The solution that was reached was that to harvest the mandrake plant, you excavate about the plant, about the base of the plant, leaving its root in the ground, but you just like dig around it and then until its root is exposed, and then you tie a hungry dog to the root of the plant. You go a distance away with a piece of meat and you call to the dog by name, and the dog comes running toward you, like expecting this meat, pulls the plant out of the ground, and the dog is the living being that overhears the shriek, so the dog dies in this process. Yeah, and then the owner is like, oh well, goodbye, at least I have this plant, and then they go sell the plant or whatever they're going to do with it. So there's also huge occult stuff with the mandrake plant, because the root of the plant supposedly resembles a human. Anyway, so I created this form, we call it the Mandrake Form, in which I have surface poems that are all tied together underneath with this root system. This page is just a splash page, and it shows you that there's 3 surface poems, first, second, third, and if you click on, you could read them straight across like you would read a book. You start at the top and read to the end of the third, but each of these surface text blocks contains within it secret poems, and I'll just show you how one works so that you can see before I launch into it, but I'm going to just start at the end. So we're going to the third installation, and I forgot to say that the surface text, which here it is, that's the surface of the third vehicle, it is all about the plant itself. Sometimes spoken in the voice of the plant, always alluding to the many occult associations, medicinal usages that I was just listing off for you. And it goes in order of the biological process of the American mandrake, which is also called the Mayapple. I don't know if any of you grew up in the woods and had the Mayapple plant just fill the woods. It's the first thing that comes up in spring. And anyway, so what happens is this is the poem you see, but really you're literally seeing hundreds of other poems. I found 2 other ones that are inside it. And what happens is letters are going to lift off the surface of the poem and reveal the poem that's inside. The letters all stay in the same order, and you can't see the inner poems because of the presence of the other letters. So for example, so these letters are lifting off the surface, and they're just disappearing. There's no use for them. There was a use. They were forming words in the top poem. And this is a liquid layer. We're just going to skip it for right now. But if you read across, you could see, you can see where this is going. These letters are going to solidify horizontally and form the next poem. So if you just read, it would be poised, sin, deliver, oust. Then you go to the next line. It's not very legible in the liquid version because of the spaces. I'll explain liquid version a little later, but this is what happens when, I'm going to skip the liquid version. Okay, so it closes together. So there's the second poem, which was present in the top poem, but you couldn't see it because there were letters in the way. Okay, and then that process happens again, where there's a lift off. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hang on. This is not an emergency. Okay, there. So there's a lift off. The letters are turning this bloody color because we're going to end with a slaughterhouse. Not to ruin the end. Michael, this is not funny. Just kidding. Okay, so, and then this solidifies again. You think it says silver us, but it's going to be silver US bombs. And this, you can go over the line breaks to get to the core poem. So, okay, we go through another liquid layer, which I'll tell you about later, but, so that's liquid, but okay, here we go. And there's the core poem. And I'm really interested in this because when I was creating this, I was trying to think of the kind of residue that the letters themselves are carrying from word to word as they traverse from the top layer down to the middle and to the bottom layer. So like you can retrace these etymologies of phrases and words. For example, like if I'm looking at silver US bombs and I'm like, okay, the US bombs are made of silver, but where did silver come from? I can back up. There it was, sin, deliver. So, okay, silver is made out of a delivered sin. Someone delivered a sin and that created silver, which created these bombs. Okay, what about, then I can keep tracing that back. So I've got, well, let me just, so there's the sin delivered. Now I'm going to trace that back and just see what made a sin. Sleep in delicate voice, sin deliver, for how, no, sleep in delicate voice. Did I miss a word? Ah! Letters are unpredictable, you just never know what they're gonna do. So somewhere, it's like this weird, you just have to just you're trying to relate these words because the letters are shared between them, and you're like, what? How is a sin delivered in someone's sleep? Like, what is the culpability of a person who delivers sin in their sleep? Or you're just forced to think, or like what, the US, in that last one comes from the word oust. What does that mean? You know what I mean? You just have sleep in delicate voice. Oh, and that's from the poem For It Promised Sleep in Delicate Voice, which is like the plant promising suicide, the possibility of suicide. And how is that a sin delivered? And so every single word that shares these letters carries these traces of other meanings into their new words, and I'm very interested in that. So anyway, let's look at one of these poems here. Okay, so I'm just going to read through it really quickly. Okay, I have a little bit of time. This is the surface layer. And as I said, we're at the end of the life cycle of the plant. So the plant has its flower has turned into a fruit at this point. Actually, the flower is there, the bloom in the third line. You can never see the flower unless you're on the ground underneath the plant, because it has this huge green umbrella and it covers the flower unless you're looking up from underneath. And then that flower turns into this yellow fruit that's poisonous, and at some point the fruit ripens and you can make jam. So again, like this is a very unpredictable plant. Okay, so this, either about the plant or spoken by the plant, etc. For it promised sleep in delicate voice. For how must the blossom be discovered, but sadness swayed a body to its knees, the bloom obscured by lonely parasols of green, for deeply the opposing lobes divided, and seen through the wet lash sudden like grace, a silent thing looks on in white, as if the heart's damp handkerchief rubbed gently through the casing, and hanging face down offers sleep, a nauseating scent, wafting from its yellow center where buffed trumpets herald in formation, a circle lore for the liquid self, invisible, eternal, the want. To pour a tongue of light lisped in by fork, to pry dark molecules open, for what's the lethal dose of us? Delirium by grief to drink the tincture or taste a shaving of the mortal stem, for we yield a 3% of ash upon incineration, for we sway indifferent lovers who drink the filters of our mix. For rubbed externally of burning, though the moon be full above the gallows tree, or infusion of the extract, or inhaled soporific vision, procession of the dead, the threaded animals who came when called, unknowing, tied about the excavated base, and called by name, came running toward a loved familiar voice. For we the first to rise before the panoply of leaves, and we arriving through the thaw, the urgent cloak of bones, we cover first the wreckage. But then the swelling of the flower into sphere, which sometime in the ripening, from petulance to succulence persuaded, and sometime blushed to yellow, fragrant, for all about The sun, the air, the moss converged in steadfast deed, an easy warming of the basking leaves, a buoyancy of petal, a soft embracing of the fibers, and from the clenched green surface of the rind worked inward to the center, from all sides inward, and found there a petal hiding its dented crown in shambles, its anguish befuddled, and it ripe for a new wondering. So swayed the thin shafts of poison realigned to nectar, the undone toxin ripe for the bee sip, to rosin the drawn legs of the grasshopper, varnish for the pulled note, a stay in slash against the slate. So then you have the letter liftoff, and then I'm just going to tell you what the liquid layers are quickly. So I already said how this is going to leave this grid with all the spaces in it. So the words themselves aren't legible because they're not regulated by punctuation or proper spacing. So and they're liquid in that the letters can fluctuate back and forth between words, and you see many words that aren't going to be the final words, but just by proximity, you just can't help but find words there. Even like vertically and horizontally, they're all fluctuating. I couldn't reproduce this in the Flash animation without it being too busy. But, the letters are supposed to be constantly fluctuating, moving left and right in their spaces, moving around. They're active electrons. But anyway, so what I did with the liquid layer that we could animate, I didn't animate it, I designed the motions. Betsy Stone Mazzolini is my friend who did this phenomenal animation. But what I designed for this layer is that each letter would throw off a shadow of itself, a version of itself that took a different path than the one that the poem is going to take. And that shadow would descend down like gravity, down to the bottom of the page, hitting the shadows of other letters that could have formed other words. And they form like trash words that pile up down at the bottom. It's like the sweat, cast off by the whole system. It's like the lactic acid or something, the waste product of this system. So that's what's happening when you start seeing letters doing that. And you can stop it at any time and just like freeze the shadow letters like that, and start seeing what words are falling out because they're just in the process of passing other letters. They'll form other words and stuff. It's infinite. I chose however many words came out, but as the page turns, the words keep forming on their own. It's not like I found all the words or something. And they have their own tone, completely different tone than the poems. So you've got like cheerleader, Dies Irae, seasoning, Dalai Lama,